Hi, my name's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I thought we would do a bit of a mid-year check-in. So looking at my stats for my reading for the year so far, some of which I've taken from Storygraph and some I have done some calculations myself for some things that I thought might be interesting to look at. And I'll talk about my plans for reading for the rest of the year and also my favourite books of the year so far. So we'll insert some graphs up here, and my story graph will be linked down below, so you can always friend me or follow me on there. In terms of how many books I've read so far this year, I've read 53 books so far. Now, I haven't set myself a numerical goal in terms of how many books I want to read because I don't really think there's any point in doing that. But I am reading fewer books than I have done in previous years, which is really just because I have started a new job, so I'm working full time and I have a commute as well, which takes sort of like a couple of hours a day probably in total. So that's why I'm reading fewer books, which is fine. Like, it does make me a bit sad that I don't have as much time for reading, but it is what it is. So then in terms of the moods of the books that I've read so far, I feel like these are always pretty similar. So mysterious, dark, reflective, emotional, and tense. That is my kind of thing. Pacing is interesting. So 62% of the books so far have been medium paced. 19% fast paced, 19% slow paced. It's interesting that the fast and the slow are exactly the same figure. Page number. So 51% of the books I've read so far have been between 300 and 499 pages, and then only 4% have been over 500 pages, which is fine. I don't read a lot of big books anyway. Let me just have a look and see, because I've no idea what those big books are. So according to Storygraph, I've read 2 books so far this year that were over 500 pages, which was The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters and Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. I don't remember Jude the Obscure being that long. Is it that long? Anyway, that's what Storygraph tells me. Fiction and non-fiction. So 94% of my reading has been fiction and 6% has been non-fiction, which seems low, but for me, I've actually read 3 non-fiction books this year so far, which is actually not bad for me because I very rarely read non-fiction. So I read a essay collection by George Orwell, I read Outrageous by Paul Baker, and I read None of the Above by Travis Alabanza. So actually, that's not bad for me. Genres is quite interesting. Right at the top is LGBTQ+. I wonder if that's partly because, obviously, we've just had June, Pride Month, so I have sort of prioritised a lot of the LGBT books from my shelves this month. But that's interesting. Then literary, thriller, mystery, horror. In terms of the format, 96% in print, 4% in audio. I normally that's like 100% print. I have listened to 2 audiobooks this year, which I'm only sort of starting to get into audiobooks a little bit. So I listened to Children of Paradise by Camilla Gradova and I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, both of which were on the Women's Prize long list. And I mostly listen to them at lunchtime at work, which was quite nice actually. So audiobooks is something I may try and get into a little bit more. In terms of my most read authors so far, well, my most read author is Jeff Vandermeer. That's because I read the Southern Reach trilogy, which I really enjoyed. Then 2 by Anthony Barclay, 2 by Sarah Waters. They were both rereads. So that's all the Storygraph. Well, that's most of the Storygraph stuff. We'll come back to star ratings a bit later on. One of the stats I wanted to look at was DNFs, obviously. So I've read 53 books this year so far, and I've DNF 27. So my DNF rate for the year so far is around 33%, which is about right. It fell at about sort of a third at the end of last year. which is fine. I DNF a lot. I'm happy with that. I think it really benefits my reading, and we will touch on more on that a little bit later. One of the things I wanted to look at was where my books are coming from. So, in terms of, are they coming from the library, or are they coming from my shelves? And if they're coming from my shelves, are they books that I have had on my shelves prior to 2023, or books that I have acquired in 2023? So for this start, I included the DNFs. So it's basically every book I've picked up, where has it come from? So about 65% of my reading this year, or the books I've picked up this year, 65% has come from the library. Around 26% has come from my shelves, books that I have owned prior to this year, and around 1% is books that are on my shelves and that I've only acquired this year. That doesn't add up to 100. I've not included NetGalleys, I've not included rereads. So 65% from the library. That's not too bad, that about a quarter of my books are coming from my shelves, because historically, usually, like the vast majority of my reading comes from the library. So that's not too bad, but it is something I would like to look at for the rest of the year in terms of reading books from my shelves. The other thing I thought would be interesting to look at would be my DNF rate by library books compared to books that I own. So my DNF rate for library books is 40%. And my DNF rate for the books from my shelves is around 23%. So that's interesting. I think it makes sense, because like a fair amount of the books that are on my shelves are books that I have specifically chosen. They're not all, because I do have a book subscription where I don't know what books I'm going to get. But all the other books that are on my shelves are books that I have chosen. Therefore, I'm more likely, I guess, to want to read. Whereas with the library books, I will very happily just take a random chance. I don't need to know very much about a book before I get it out of the library, because I'll happily DNF it and take it back. So I thought that was an interesting stat to look at. I have reread 5 books so far this year, which is not too bad. And I also thought it would be interesting to look at how many works in translation I have picked up this year. And I've only picked up 3 translated works so far this year, one of which I DNF'd. So that's surprisingly low, actually, and that's something I want to maybe focus on for the rest of the year. And then the final story graph chart I wanted to look at is the ratings one. So I always think it's interesting to look at people's ratings chart on Storygraph. If you follow anyone on there, you can just click on their stats and scroll down, and you'll see their graph of how they rate their books. I always think it's interesting to see the sort of distribution of different people's ratings. Obviously everyone has different, even though everyone might use 1 to 5 stars, say on Storygraph, that will mean different things to different people. So for me, when I give a book a 3-star, it means I liked it. It means it was a thumbs up. So I think I probably rate slightly lower than some people, from what I hear. Anyway, my average rating, I'll put the graph up here. My average rating for the year so far is 3.37 stars. So you can see there, I've got obviously a lot of 3 stars and a fair amount of 3.54 and 4.5 stars as well. So then what I thought would be interesting would be to look at what percentage of the books that I read to the end of am I given 3 stars or over, as in a definite thumbs up. And it is 83%. So 83% of the books that I finish are 3 stars or over, which means I liked it. I definitely liked it. Like a 2-star for me means, it can mean it was okay, or it wasn't great, or, but yeah, so that's really good, I think, 83% at 3 stars or more. And I think that is testament to my great DNFing. I mean, it just goes to show, I think it does pay off. So I think those are all the stats. I'm looking here because I have my little stats here. So those are all the stats I think I wanted to look at. So I'll come to my favourite books of the year so far in a moment. In terms of my reading plans for the rest of the year, I have a few sort of vague plans. I want to continue and finish my rereading of all of Sarah Waters' novels. I only have one more left to reread, which is The Little Stranger, which I think I will read in October because it is a spooky book. I'm interested to see what I think of The Little Stranger on a reread because I didn't really like it the first time around. So we'll see how that goes. And then I will do a video about Sarah Waters' books, I think. Booker season is soon upon us. And my plan for the Booker Prize this year is the same as always, really, which is I'll pick up any of the books that are listed which are of interest to me, as long as I can get them from the library, because I am very unlikely to want to purchase any of them. And usually the library's not too bad, but last year, for some reason, they hardly had any. They had 4 of the long listed books, 2 of which I had already read, like before the long list was announced anyway. The other 2 I had no interest in reading. So I didn't really participate in Booker reading last year. So we'll see how we go this year. If I can't get my hands on any of the books, I will just have to live it vicariously through watching everyone else's Booker content. I did do a video at the start of the year for the Queer TBR Tackle. I will link that video down below. I have read a fair amount of those books. A fair amount of those books on that list I have just read in June for Pride Month. But there are still some that I am yet to read. Okay, let's consult my list. Which have I not yet read? I haven't updated this. So I still need to read Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I've got One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, which I think is a bit of a rom-com travel time hop thing. Ace by Angela Chen, which I do have a copy of now. That's non-fiction, so I can read that. Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which I mentioned. I've got 2 classics on here, and I'm unlikely to get to both of them this year, but maybe I'll get to one or the other. And those are Orlando by Virginia Woolf and The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. I feel like for both of those books, I probably need to be in the mood for them. So, I'm not going to force it if I'm not in the mood. We'll see. And then there was another one that I wanted to reread, which was Love Another Thought Experiment by Sophie Ward, which I do own a copy of. So I may pick that up at some point. If not this year, probably next year. And then my other plan, I guess my biggest kind of plan for my reading for the rest of the year is I do want to read more books from my shelves. So you may have seen that I have a book subscription service box thing that I sign up to, so I get 2 books a month, which are both used books, both in the category of world literature, and I am kind of behind on reading them, not because I don't want to, just because my head's always turned by library books. So I think I am going to focus on trying to read some of the books from my shelves, some of the books that I've got on those subscription boxes, some of the books that I have bought myself over the last sort of couple of years and not got to yet. And a number of those books are translated as well, so that would sort of help me in reading more translated books, because I'm surprised that I've read so few translated books this year so far. So let me tell you about my favourite books of the year so far then. I have given 7 books 4.5 stars and only 1 book 5 stars. I don't know why. We'll come to that one at the end. So in terms of the books that I've given 4.5 stars, 2 of them are rereads by Sarah Waters, The Paying Guests and Tipping the Velvet. We have a non-fiction, None of the Above, by Travis Alabanza, which is about Travis's experience of being non-binary, genderqueer. That's a really, really excellent non-fiction that I would highly recommend. We have a short story collection, Salt Slow by Julia Armfield, which is kind of weird, understated horror that I loved. A classic, Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy, one of my favourite books of the year so far. And I do want to read more Hardy actually, so I may pick up some more Hardy later on in the year. I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. This is the one that I listened to on audiobook and was on the Women's Prize long list. Should have been shortlisted. That was robbed. But I loved I'm a Fan. It's very, like, it's got a very strong voice, and it's just, I mean, it's just brilliant. The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, which is a horror novel that I only just finished reading a couple of days ago. That was excellent, sort of isolated setting, really, really tense, really page turning. And that's it. So those are the 4.5-star reads. And then the 5-star read was I Have Some Questions For You by Rebecca Mackay. And I have done an individual book review video on this one, which I will link down below. But I just thought it was so wonderful. Sort of, we're following a woman who goes back to teach at a college where she herself was a student, and one of her friends was murdered when she was a student, and it's her sort of reflecting on that. It looks at the nature of true crime, it looks at misogyny and gender and so much stuff, and I thought it was absolutely wonderful. So I am hoping for some more 5-star reads this year, of course. I don't know why I feel like I've been having a good reading year, even though I've only had 1 5-star. I think that probably says more about me than the books that I'm reading. But no, I'm looking forward to reading some more good books in the second half of the year. So thank you for watching. Do let me know what you've been reading and what your favourite book is of the year so far. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Thanks. Bye.